During the meeting, French President Emmanuel Macron confirmed that long-anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive against Russian forces started a few days earlier and said it had been meticulously planned by military leadership in Kiev.
Yes, the Ukrainian counteroffensive started several days ago. It was planned with care and methodically by military leaders who have shown for a little over a year their determination, their bravery and the excellence of their tactics and organization. And so this offensive is going to take place over several weeks, even several months. We did everything to help it within the limits we have set ourselves from the start of the conflict. Sanction Russia to stop its war effort, help Ukraine resist and regain territory, but never attack Russia and avoid any form of escalation.
Aider l'Ukraine à résister et à reconquérir le territoire.
And now we have a dilemma. Ukrainian armed forces do not tell much about counteroffensive, hardly anything, which is absolutely the right thing to do if you do not want to disclose your counteroffensive plans too early. And of course, Russians and pro-Russian media post loads of disinformation about all these enormous losses and inability of Ukraine to regain territories. Well, then again, of course, they do. They are Ukrainian enemies. We expect nothing else. They try to persuade the world that Ukraine needs the negotiations with the Russian Federation. Can you please advise our audience, not the professionals, but our people that are watching us right now, what is the best communication strategy to resist Kremlin lies, and where and how one can find the truth about what is happening really in the world and in Ukraine?
Well, I go back to an article that I wrote only yesterday when I talked about I talked about the 5 great lies that Russia tells. But, we have got to, back in 2017, I wanted to conduct an international campaign that was basically, the title of the campaign would have been Russia Lies on an Industrial Scale. And many people in many countries in the West thought that we could not use language like this because it would offend Russia. So finally, we need to educate our viewers and our audiences and ordinary men and women in the street. People must understand the very nature of Russian disinformation. So we must know that anything that Russia says at the moment about the counteroffensive can have absolutely no credibility. And it's only through people. This is what, I studied the way Sweden and Finland in particular dealt with Russian disinformation when I was in Ukraine from 2016 to 2018. And I believe that Sweden and Finland were 2 of the leading countries in dealing with disinformation. And the one common thing that I learned about how Finland and Sweden dealt with disinformation was education early on to build resilience. And by resilience, they meant resistance to lies, to actually know, well, if Russia is saying it, it probably has no credibility. So that's the first and most important thing. The second thing is to absolutely accept, I'm sure you've seen it, the Ukraine's Ministry of Defense under the great Alexei Reznikov put out a film about a week and a half ago where they had a whole lot of soldiers going, shush. They wanted silence. Don't talk about it. During the Second World War, there was a saying in Britain, loose lips sink ships. Britain engaged in many, many great deceptions to fool the Germans. Russia engages, all armies engage in deception. The Russians have a name for it. It is, I can't think of the name at the moment. The only thing I would say, Ukraine will also engage in deception. The only thing that I would say, my money is on Ukraine, because the Ukrainian armed forces and leadership have so far shown themselves to be a lot more intelligent and a lot smarter than their Russian counterparts. So I think we have got to accept there are far too many people, for example, online, armchair generals, I call them, coming out with all sorts of theories of what's happening and so forth. I don't think this is helpful. it adds to the confusion. I have actually turned down a number of interview requests in the last few weeks because I said I will not speculate. I do not know and I will not speculate. I do not believe it is helpful. So two things. I think we must help people to understand, and to give them the example of the great lies. Ukraine is full of Nazis. No, it's not. The 2013-2014 Revolution of Dignity, the Maidan Revolution, was an American-backed coup to bring down a democratically elected president, Yanukovych. No, it was not. It was Europe's last great popular, spontaneous revolution. I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people who stood on Maidan every night. I spoke to an old man who'd been a colonel in the Soviet army and fought in Afghanistan, who stood on the Maidan in temperatures of -20 with his wife in her 70s. These people became friends. They were parents of a colleague of mine. And they were on the Maidan when people were being shot. And in their 70s, they would not take a step back.
Well,
so, these are the great lies. And also, Ukraine commits genocide against the Russian-speaking minority. No, I'll tell you where genocide was committed. The great city of Mariupol, a Russian-speaking city, and a city that politically tended to lean towards, you will know this better than I, tended to lean towards more Russia-sympathetic political parties, right? That city had a population of 500,000. The mayor of Mariupol, we will never know, has estimated that over 100,000 citizens died in the first 3 months of the Russian invasion. The Nazis killed 20,000 in the 1940s. In 2 years, Russia has likely killed 100,000. That's a genocide of the Russian-speaking people. These are the great lies which Russia tells, which I have had to deal with sometimes in television debates, which I have seen supposedly intelligent people come out with. Useful idiots. So we must do more. Yourselves who have a voice and a platform, all of us, we must help people to understand the nature of how Russia operates and how they weaponize information and they use lies as weapons, and how they have been spending hundreds of millions on this certainly since the formation of Russia Today in 2005, and it really escalated with the annexation of Crimea in 2014. And this is open to everyone. It's open source information. Google Gerasimov doctrine. Gerasimov, I don't know whether he's been sacked or whether he's still in place at the moment because the generals changed so much, but Gerasimov was at one stage the chief of staff of the Russian armed forces. He is credited more than anybody else with putting together the Russia's hybrid war strategy based on lying on an industrial scale. People have got to understand this. So when there is no point. Once a lie is out there, we can't bring it back. People must realize when they hear the lie first, they don't believe it. That is the first thing. And secondly, those of us on our side, we must accept and we must trust in the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian armed forces, and we must not speculate. It's very hard, but speculation is not helpful.
Thank you very much, Cormac, for your answer. I just love the way and your position. But do you think the governments of our partners' country know the exact figures of our losses? Do you think that they can even imagine how many people we've lost? Civilians and our heroes at the front lines just as well.
Look, I can't believe that British intelligence, American intelligence, the governments of the Baltic countries, I cannot believe that they have not got a very good idea. Ukraine, from the very start, as you know, has published every day. The Ministry of Defense has published a tally of enemy losses. I think Ukraine will put these figures out to to try and build morale among the Ukrainian people. I am not saying for a moment I do not believe them, but actually I don't think it's the most important thing. I'll tell you what the most important thing is. I'm working at the moment with the mayor of a small city in Western Ukraine. And I had a meeting by Zoom with him yesterday. I'm trying to do some stuff to build links with local government in Ukraine and local government in the United Kingdom. And the first meeting I had with Volodymyr, and this is a big, tough guy with a big reputation. He is a war veteran. He fought in 2014 and 2015. And he tells me that he has his army pack and his gun by his door, ready to go anytime he is called up. But in the meantime, he is the mayor of his city. He does humanitarian work to the front, and he travels around the world trying to get support for Ukraine. But the first time I spoke to him, and it was as if we were in the same room, he looked into my eyes, Cormac, he said, we are losing so many and we are losing our best. And he almost broke down in tears. And he said, it's not like Russia that we empty our prisons and Russia doesn't care about. Russia clearly does not care. Putin does not care about how many of his own people he throws into the meat grinder. We know, you and I know from living among you for 2 years, that Ukraine cares about its own people. And when Volodymyr looked into my eyes and he said, Cormac, we are losing thousands and we are losing our best. And there is how much can Ukraine bear? Well, I looked at a very recent survey that said, I think 84% of the Ukrainian people said they would keep fighting and they would not back any concession of land for peace.
Absolutely.
Because of course, we know that in every single settlement Ukraine's armed forces liberate, they find the same abominable pattern of war crimes and abuse that were found in Bucha after the Battle of Kyiv was won. So abandoning fellow citizens to the butchery and the barbarism of Russia is simply not acceptable. I don't think Volodymyr Zelensky could sue for peace at the moment. I don't think the Ukrainian people would allow him. And as a leader, I believe he is very well reflecting the will of the people who he was chosen to lead at this very difficult point in history.